Hey guys, Happy New Year and welcome to a special episode of Trigger. Tonight we're going to take you through the past year of the show from the very first episode and highlight some of the best interviews with the best guests on the topics that you guys care about. So I hope that everyone finished out the year strong. I know I had an absolute blast with the family and we're doing fireworks and it was a mess, but it was amazing. Closing out a crazy year. Just so much going on. So we're going to play back some of the great clips of that one. We're going to have some fun with that. I also hope you guys had a great Christmas or whatever it is that you celebrate. But 2024 going to be a big year and we're all going to have to work. So this one is going to be a fun one. We have had an incredible year with major growth on the show and just trying to get it out there for Rumble, a true free speech platform. So tonight you're going to hear from major figures like Tucker Carlson, Steve Bannon, Darren Beattie, Roseanne Barr, even your favorite president and my father, Donald J. Trump. But I also want to take a moment to thank all of you for supporting the show and making all of this possible. You know, I started this out, honestly, like I never thought I'd actually have a podcast, right? I didn't think I'd be doing that. But given what's gone out there in the mainstream media, we talk about this regularly. This is not an uncommon theme on this show. Given what happens in big tech, given all of the limitations on what you could say on YouTube, a total disaster for free speech, for free thought that doesn't just go along with the narrative. Rumble's just been amazing for that. And so we got to get out there and like the businesses that we got to try to support. We talk about that pretty regularly on the show, supporting a true free speech platform, no limitations. It's there for everyone. They let me do my thing, but we also got to make sure that we get that message out there. Right? We're up against literally trillion-dollar institutions whose seeming purpose is obviously to do the work of today's radical leftists, the Marxists. It's no longer the Democrat Party, right? We understand that. They're working full-time to do that. So started doing this to try to break through that as best as we can. So really appreciate you guys, and you can help us by hitting the like button, by sharing, by subscribing, send it to your friends. And remember, you can also find Triggered on Spotify and Apple Podcasts after they air here on Rumble. So, like this time of year, if you're traveling for the holidays or whatever it may be, or you drive on the weekends and you want to listen that way, it's another awesome way to stay in touch with what's going on. So today, we're obviously, and together, we're taking on that legacy media and giving millions and millions of Americans a voice and a home right here on Rumble, where you can get all the news without the spin, without the nonsense, and bring you the uncensored conversations and unfiltered talk that I think everyone actually wants, that I think would be so important for growth. I know for me in life, just regurgitating what someone else tells you without having to think about it, without having to argue it right, wrong, or indifferent, literally did nothing for my progress, my education, getting better at whatever it is that I was doing. So, having those conversations, having those uncomfortable conversations, just fundamental in all of our growth. But before we get into all of that, I want to give you guys a quick rundown of some of the top headlines, immigration obviously being a big one this year, because in this new year, expect all of the far left insanity to just keep getting worse. It's only going to get worse, folks. There's probably nothing they will not throw at us. We've seen that. They've totally disregarded basic rules. They screech and scream about democracy, even though we're a constitutional republic. Minor details. I hint on that's what's going on. But we saw that. We saw that in Maine. Just this week, the Maine Secretary of State took my father off the ballot there. Not because of a case, not because of the law. She's not even a lawyer. She just unilaterally decided. So remember when the Democrats talk about democracy and they scream about all this stuff, like, they don't actually believe it, folks. They don't believe a word of it. You have a single individual, not even a lawyer, not even citing actual cases in Maine or elsewhere, but someone who, and I quote, watched some YouTube videos. Think about that. They watched some YouTube videos about Donald Trump possibly being an insurrectionist. I mean, by that logic, I mean, what I think we should start watching Alex Jones and running with what he goes with, because candidly, he's been much more correct than all of the media for the last decade or so. Why don't we start doing that? Why don't Republican Secretary of State start doing that and throw Joe Biden off? I mean, clearly, there's far more links to Joe Biden and bribery schemes than there are to Donald Trump and any insurrection, because despite their narrative, we've seen that crumble over the last year. 2023 saw that narrative go down the tubes real quickly, but they'll still run with it, right? The first unarmed insurrection in the history of the world. But beyond that, folks, we got to understand what that other side is doing, and we got to combat it, which is another reason why we have to take it so seriously, why we do have to share these messages, why we do have to support the companies that actually support this kind of programming, and not just, blindly follow the herd or big woke corporate, et cetera. Unfortunately, we're starting 2024 under invasion. Biden ended 2023 by setting another record. More than 302,000 illegal immigrants crossed into the United States across our southern border in December. That's an all-time record, all-time. Last month, that was set. The last record was set a few months back. I guess it was in September. And it just keeps going. And they're not making any effort to stop. And we know why, guys, right? It's not the great replacement theory that's the great replacement reality of what the Democrats are trying to do. Okay, there are a lot of numbers that get thrown around when it comes to illegal immigration. Here's a comparison that makes it very easy for everyone to understand the scale of this invasion. There are now more illegal immigrants crossing into the United States than there are babies born here on an annual basis. Think about that. More illegals coming in here than there are babies born here. There are about 3.2 million babies born every year, and the Biden administration says 3.8 million illegal immigrants crossed in the past fiscal year. Think about that. And that's what they know about. Imagine how many more millions they have no idea about. I mean, so that number probably pales in comparison to the real number. The illegal immigrants are not going to stop coming as long as Democrats are in power. They're encouraging this. Starting today, illegal immigrants residing in California will become eligible for taxpayer-funded health insurance. I mean, are you serious? This is estimated to cost citizens there about $3.1 billion annually. People in California pay taxes to take care of people who are illegally in their state. Not only do you have to pay for yourself and your children and your families and their education and their health insurance and everything else, you have the privilege and the honor of paying for millions who will flock there for said free privileges. That's where we are in the United States. Okay? Your American dream is dying because of these insane policies. You are a second-class citizen in your own country. You have to go work extra hard to make sure that others can benefit from your work for free while being there illegally. And where's Biden during this invasion? Of course, again, he's on vacation. He's on perpetual vacation. 40% of his time in the presidency so far has been on vacation. 40% for the president of the United States. I'm sure he's not a puppet just placed there to do the work of the radicals who are actually in charge, right, guys? So to be fair, whether he's napping on the beach or napping in the White House, what difference does it make? Biden couldn't run a lemonade stand, let alone a country. The invasion of our nation wasn't the only thing that happened in 2023. It was a monumental year. The Democrats took the unprecedented step of not only indicting their chief political opponent, but removing him from several ballots. We discussed this earlier with the Maine Secretary of State. You saw what was going on in Colorado. And while there's conservatives out there screeching that it's a victory that they put him back on the ballot while it's at the Supreme Court, the same leftist Secretary of State, like you saw in Maine, in Colorado, will do that if the Supreme Court doesn't act appropriately. I'm sure the left will be there intimidating them like they have. And again, if we did that to them, it would be a major problem and people would go to jail. But we don't live in a system of equal justice. If that's the election interference we saw in an off year, okay, removing the primary opponent, a former president of the United States, from the ballot in states, not based on a conviction, just based on, well, maybe there's something there somewhere down the line. Imagine what sort of election interference we're going to see in 2024. And 2023 was a year in which the world was set on fire with Hamas, their violent invasion of Israel, the rape and murder of women and children in the streets, the heads of major universities, some of our, at least what I thought were formerly our finest institutions, taking the side of Hamas, not just the right of Palestinian people to exist, let's be clear, actually condoning the violent behavior. We saw protests all over the United States, hundreds of thousands for the same thing. You think we're the same country we were just a couple of years ago? I don't. And I'm sure those 3 whatever million people coming across the border every year, I'm sure they're going to bring a lot of great morals and values. I'm sure they'll assimilate nicely, like none of the other people who've come that way have. Virtually none. I'm sure there's 2 or 3 that they'll fact check me with, but that's what's nice about Rumble. I don't think things are going to calm down in 2024. In this year's address to China, President Xi Jinping promised a complete reunification of China and Taiwan. I don't know about you guys, but I don't trust Joe Biden to handle that all that well. He can't handle a flight of stairs. And look who he has running our military. The Pentagon now resembles an MSNBC green room. Watch this transgender lieutenant colonel talk about how inclusivity is a national security issue, folks. It is. They're going to be awesome on the battlefield. I'm sure this has nothing to do with the recruitment crisis we face, because actual patriotic Americans who do a good job and would be the people we'd want fighting for us probably don't want to fight for this. Check it out.
So inclusion is a national security imperative. We fight today, and we are going to fight in the future using brain power. And if that brain, who's going to revolutionize the way we fight in space, we fight in cyber, just happens to be in a trans body, you should want them all serving alongside me. And for your organizations, it's the same way. Those perspectives that we get from a diverse set of individuals, it's been talked about on stage a lot regarding the science behind high-performing teams. We need those perspectives. But it's inclusion that actually drives that. Because you can bring people in, and if they don't feel safe to speak up, if they don't feel safe to bring their full selves to work, you're not going to get the value of the diversity. So for us, it is absolutely critical to drive our future success as an organization and potentially on the battlefield. And I think it's the same way for all of you, because we can't leave that talent that is going to revolutionize the way we do business behind.
Yeah, folks, I'm sure that'll be great. I'm sure that'll do wonders. I'm sure Putin, Xi Jinping, our friendly dictators all over the world, the Ayatollahs and North Korea, I'm sure they watch that and they're laughing their asses off, like I was. So here's my New Year's resolution, folks. 2024 is the year we retake the White House. We regain our freedoms. We put an end to the deep state and the nonsense and the lies and the manipulation and the never-ending wars. How long can a country survive when more illegal immigrants flood our nation than we have babies born in it? Can a country win wars where it doesn't know that there are 2 genders, or that making sure we're really inclusive of people who were literally labeled by doctors just a few short years ago as having mental issues are going to be leaders on the field of battle. I'm sure this is going to work out wonderfully. The cause of many of this nation's problems are simple. It's Joe Biden. It's Democrat policy. It's the radical puppet masters that are in charge. It's the Marxists, because again, this is not your parents' Democrat Party. It's not your grandparents' Democrat Party, for sure. The stalwarts of that party would be rolling over in their graves watching what's going on right now. But hopefully people wake up to the insanity. They see what they're pushing. They see calling Catholics around the country, concerned parents at PTA meetings, domestic terrorists, and labeling them as such. They see the turning a blind eye to the violence from the radical left for years. People get it. They see the insanity of Democrat policy and what that's done to our economy and to prices. Oh, yeah, don't worry. I'm sure the Fed's going to come in and try to bail out the Democrats. They're going to try to do something temporarily, but it's only going to compound the problem in the future. You know exactly what's coming. They're going to do it all. The solution, guys, is just this simple. Evict Joe Biden from the White House. Evict radical Democrat policy from our nation. Right? And then we can have a happy new year. So before we get to all the great interviews, I just have to take a second to thank our incredible sponsors for having the guts to keep supporting the show week after week. Guys, make sure to check out the awesome folks over at Goldco. We see it. We talk about it daily. Interest rates are going through the roof. Inflation's persisting. Of course, we're still seeing reckless spending, global turmoil, probably more and more wars. Biden-caused disasters each and every day, and it's only leading to more economic anxiety. I just want you to be prepared, and owning tangible, physical, inflation hedging gold and silver can help secure and stabilize your portfolio. Goldco has top-notch customer service. They'll answer all your questions. They'll walk you through the process step by step. So go to donjuniorgold.com. That's DONJR gold.com. Learn more, educate yourself, let them walk you through it so you understand what you're doing. We're not like the other side that's just going to force you to do something. We want you to actually educate yourself. You can do that at donjrgold.com. And also, guys, check out the great folks at My Patriot Supply. Just like we've been telling you, our major institutions are doubling down on their corruption each and every day, and you certainly can't rely on our government to ensure your family's safety and security in a time of crisis. You need to be prepared. So act today with My Patriot Supply. My Patriot Supply is the country's leader in emergency preparedness, and you need to be ready in the case of a disaster. We've seen what's going on. This isn't just a COVID thing, but where I live in Florida, hurricanes, floods, you never know. Their best-selling 3-month emergency food kit provides delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners that last up to 25 years in storage. These kits provide over 2,000 calories every day and they're simple to prepare. Just go to preparewithdonjr.com, and when you order by 3 p.m., you'll literally get same-day shipping, and the shipping is always free. Go to preparewithdonjr.com. Like I always say, guys, it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. And when you got 25 years to work with, I'm sure you'll figure out a use for it. So go to preparewithdonjr.com, PREPARE with donjr.com. And guys, speaking of being prepared, the corollary to just your food is also your medicinal needs. I also want to introduce you to one of our newest sponsors, the Wellness Company. They're a leader in providing emergency medical kits. Like we saw with COVID, supply chain crisis, lockdowns, Fauci failures, that can all make it so much harder to get medicine when your family needs it, when you're in a time of crisis. With the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit, you're empowered to take control of your health. The kit includes life-saving medications, including amoxicillin, the Z-Pak, ivermectin, for you to keep on hand, along with a guidebook for safe use. So from tick bites to COVID to extreme public health outbreaks, every scenario covered. Avoid the high cost, the hospital wait times and lines, and take control of your family's health needs. Go to twc.health/triggered, like the Wellness Company, twc.health/triggered for 15% discount off the emergency medical kit. That's twc.health/triggered. And with that, guys, enjoy the episode Let me know in your comments who you want to see in 2024. You can follow along, see what you're suggesting. Team's going to write it down. So let me know who you actually want out there. We'll have some fun with that. Make sure you're liking, you're sharing, you're subscribing. And honestly, guys, again, I hope you finished out 2023 strong. I hope you're in this. It's going to be a brutal year. But this is the year we can take back our country. And I want you guys to be a part of that. So thanks for everything. Thanks for following along. Thanks for liking, for sharing, subscribing, for downloading the Rumble app, for listening and, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your stuff. But we really appreciate it. Thank you for being in this fight with us, and enjoy. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. This is unique to me. Actually, strangely enough, probably the first time I've been actually nervous in a long time. It's just so different. I'm used to kind of getting up on a stage with a mic and talking to 10, 15,000 people. It's not a problem, but we're at a unique place in our country, something that's probably never happened before, or perhaps it's always been happening and we haven't been exposed to it as much. So I'm super psyched to be doing this on a platform. We're here, again, because we're at a crossroads. I'm on Rumble because it's one of the few platforms that's out there that hasn't censored people. They actually believe in what so many of you, all of my followers, believe in, that notion of free speech, that notion of freedom that's so important to America.
Yeah, I've heard you say it, and for the average person to understand exactly what that means.
Right. It's not coined by me. It has a person who coined it was kind of a controversial guy called Sam Francis, but it's a very powerful insight, and it describes really the reality that we have anarchy and lawlessness with respect to the sort of clients of the regime, the political allies of the regime, and you have really tyranny with respect to ordinary middle-class conservative citizens. The best example of it comes from your monologue. And anarcho-tyranny is we don't prosecute looters, but we prosecute anyone who says anything offensive within 100 miles of a drag queen story hour. The Alvin Bragg talk about a subliterate. They talk about him as, he created a novel prosecution. And I know we're mixing terms here, but he's not involved with anything like a novel. This guy is involved with picture books. This is subliterate.
Yeah, there's nothing novel about it. Well, no, I mean, the only novel aspect of it is that it's a first in terms of the devolution of just polite society in America and everything we believe. I will say, it's shocking to me. Everything I believed America to be, so much of that is an illusion. And I would have never known that from the outside. That's why, any insight I can give to people hey man, I've been a fly on the wall. I've been in those rooms. I've then seen the reporting about what was supposedly done in those rooms. And there's not even a pretense of truth anymore, right? You think hey, well, maybe this guy interpreted it a little bit differently. It's no, here's the narrative. This is what we want. Here's our end objective. It's no different than communist China, right?
Right.
Here's where we want to be. So everything is open season between, now and then to get to where we want to be. It's like China, right? They'll steamroll their entire population because they want to be here in 50 years.
Right.
Peasants be damned.
Right.
They don't care. But that's actually how our government functions in many ways, and with the media, in large part being, their lackeys.
Absolutely, and I'd love to get to China. Just to finish the point about anarcho-tyranny, you have, again, Alvin Bragg, arguably subliterate. I don't know if he can read. That's an open question. But the thing about him is he was one of these guys just like the mayor of Chicago you're talking about. His whole thing from the very beginning was, I'm not going to prosecute basically any offenses that are relevant to basic quality of life in, for the people that I'm supposed to represent.
Murder and rape, it's fine.
But when it comes to a trivial document filing claim against fraud, which he couldn't even do because the statute of limitations ran out, so that's where the novelty comes in. But when dumb people try to do creative things, the end result is even more ridiculous than you can imagine. And that's why you had these people like John Bolton and others come out and say, my God, maybe we shouldn't outsource our domestic war on terror to this low IQ operatives. But you see it in Alvin Bragg. You see it, and it's not just with your father. It goes down the line. Recently, I think you've talked about this. There's a case of this young guy called Doug Mackey, who was a great supporter of your father's, had a great Twitter account, extremely influential, just an ordinary guy. He really irritated Hillary Clinton because he dared to mock her, and the Biden Department of Justice just convicted this guy of a felony. By
the way, up to 10 years in prison for memes.
Yes.
In America, First Amendment doesn't matter. Again, he's going against the norm. Now, there's plenty of people, literally exact same crime, on the other way against Donald Trump,
exactly.
Same thing. And it's like, they don't even get prosecuted, let alone face 10 years in prison.
Right.
I mean, Joe Biden's perhaps an example of what you're talking about in the sense that Joe Biden's so stupid, he'll actually sign anything that the powers that be put in front of him. So I actually think, like Alvin Bragg, I think is being a useful idiot to George Soros,
right.
And those likes, I think Joe Biden is actually that to Obama, Susan Rice, whoever's still in charge, because they were smart enough to preserve their legacies. Right. They may not agree with everything in America, but they weren't going to go against the American public and hurt their legacies and their abilities to buy, $15 million homes in Martha's Vineyard and all of this stuff. They weren't going to quite do that, but they're more than happy to destroy Joe Biden's legacy by having him sign whatever it is that they want, and they get where we want. So he's like the useful idiot, but frankly, he was much more effective than the Obamas of the world because they don't care about protecting his name, image, and likeness for the future.
Right. Well, he's clearly an instrument, and there are underlying forces that are much more powerful than him. I mean, the regime is really exhibiting itself in unprecedented ways, and this has a lot of downstream effects. For instance, you mentioned China. It's always been kind of unique to America's self-understanding that we are kind of a moral nation, a moral exemplar to other countries. We're a bastion of freedom. And whether or not, that's true in the past, it's always been an integral part of the way we've sold ourselves and marketed ourselves and affected foreign policy and diplomacy overseas. Recently, an interesting tweet from this guy who's doing a lot of interesting work in El Salvador, Bukele, who's basically brought MS-13 to heel. He correctly, and I think very insightfully, pointed out, look, how can America continue to say, just recently, one of Biden's lackeys castigated Tunisia for daring to jail political opposition. The same thing in Cambodia.
Wait a minute, guys. We're ceding the high ground, right? There was a time where America had the moral high ground, and you could say that would never happen in America. And yet, the banana republic shit that we call out and have been able to call out, if I'm Putin, you sit there and be like, I don't know, guys,
right?
I'm watching all the people who really hate Putin and really hate, they're calling for a regime. I'm like, wait a minute, but you're okay with them jailing Trump, though. That's different. Trump's the exception that proves the Putin rule, right? He's the political opposition, but it's okay because it's Trump.
Exactly. It's a very dangerous and bizarre trend. And especially as conflict is gearing up with China, we don't really have that moral high ground that was available to us, say, in the Cold War with the Soviet Union, where Reagan could say, we're the free society, Soviet Union is basically the gulag. In this case, it seems like there are two different authoritarian systems emerging. There's the Chinese authoritarian system, and there's the system associated with what I call not America, but the globalist American empire, which is just as authoritarian, is becoming so, plus drag queens.
Yes.
It's just as authoritarian, plus all of these ridiculous things, as we have the same basic underlying injury. But at least in China, there's no insult. And the insult added to the injury is the thing that makes our country ridiculous, and I think is increasingly a laughingstock on the world stage. And the other kind of serious point on this, there's a real interesting tension emerging, because it just is the same time as the national security state has basically declared war on conservative Americans, it's conservatives that they'll rely upon to have this kind of battered wife syndrome to say, well, we're going to beat you down domestically, but the second we need you for another war, you're going to be the
Show
first
me
to
the money.
sign up. Exactly.
And, well, but you see that, and I've had, all my friends, like real operators and SEAL team guys, and all, they're saying like they're out there having these conversations, and they're telling me, they're like, I would never let my kids do this. Like these are guys that, they literally bled for our country, but they would want their children to do the same, and like there's tradition of generations of people who fought wars for this country, and they're like, I wouldn't even think about it because, if you're trans, you'll become an admiral in about 3 seconds, and you can do that. And then while you're going, I had Ronnie Jackson on here talking about that as someone who was an admiral and, in a medical profession. He was like, oh yeah, by the way, like if you're going through the paid for by the U.S. government gender affirming surgery, like because of all the medications, you're not actually even allowed to be on active duty abroad. So they give you a cushy office. It's like, it's a huge scam.
Right.
You check them. I served our country while sitting in a nice air-conditioned office with no intention to do that while the American taxpayer gets to pay for my gender reassignment surgery. But who's going to go sign up for these things anymore?
It's amazing. It's like we were saying, becoming transgender is the ultimate life hack in America, and it's literally a hack. No pun intended.
Today, it's the It's, as far as I'm concerned, and I say this being the son of a billionaire, I think it's the highest level of privilege. If utilized properly in America today. There's no school you can't get into. There's no position that you're not checking off a box that they would love to fill. And by the way, the more you're pretending it, probably the better it is, because you don't have the lunacy that goes along with so much of it, right? So I feel it's the highest form of privilege in society today.
You can get into Harvard, then just for kicks, you can join women's MMA, just beat up a woman, get into Harvard,
and they'll never throw you out. And
you're
you're beyond question, you're beyond reproach.
Right.
And you can always fall back, you're being a racist, like everything else these days. But where does it end?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think these tensions are yet to be resolved. I think, your father stands as the most compelling symbolic representation of opposition to all these forces. And it really is about your father. People talk about Trumpism after Trump. I think that's a total scam. The idea of Trumpism it's a total scam because it's really the ploy to eliminate both Trumpism and Trump. There are a lot of kind of pseudo sophisticates out there who think you can just get the policy script and give it to anyone, that it's interchangeable. That's not how political movements work. There's a reason that the system is targeted against specific individual. That individual happens to be the person who created and continues to lead one of the most powerful political movements in the nation's history.
All right, guys. Well, first off, I want to take the time to thank Tucker Carlson for joining us. I know a lot of things are going on your end, Tucker, right now, including launching literally a new media company, taking on a lot of the establishment that's out there with the Tucker Carlson Network. Now, you've done some big interviews lately. Kid Rock, Dana White, Alex Jones. But when are we going to see the interviews that we're all waiting for, like Brian Stelter, Zelensky, or even perhaps creepy porn lawyer Michael Avenatti? I mean, that one may be the #1 interview I want to see of all time based on episode 1 that we saw. But, it's hard to say of all of them who's the biggest grifter, but maybe it's Zelensky. What do you think?
I would love to interview him, and I can't do it in Ukraine. I think I would be arrested there. I'm not really afraid. I mean, at this point, my kids are around. I'm not really afraid of much. I don't think I should go to Ukraine, though. So I'm not going to do that. But I would love to interview Zelensky. He's turned us down. Avenatti's in prison for many years. We did just visit Julian Assange in prison. So, I've interviewed people in prison before, but I don't know if he would sign off on us visiting. We've got a bunch of interviews coming, but you're totally right. And Stelter, that's a tough call. I mean, first of all, I don't want to be in the same room as Stelter. There's something very poisonous about that guy and kind of feline and scary. Alex Jones was absolutely right about Brian Stelter. It's not just that he's wrong. It's that there's a lot of malice in Brian Stelter, a lot of things are repressed in Brian Stelter, but a lot of repressed rage and hatred. And he's a destroyer. I agree with that. But I think we talked to him by remote.
it feels like there's so much malice just in the media in general. I mean, you are one of the people that really, you created Rachel Maddow, right? You brought her on. You gave her a platform. You've worked with Joe Scarborough. You used to work for, some pretty prominent figures in conservatism that have, lost their minds. What's going on there? How'd that malice come about?
I don't know. I suspect it's personal. I mean, I really think your politics grow out of whatever is inside you. And in the case of Joe Scarborough specifically, I mean, I knew him really well, and I always admired his intelligence. He's genuinely smart. He's not stupid at all. Very clever guy, very calculating guy. But I think the burden of things that Joe has done, and I'm not just talking about the murder he's been accused of. I have my views on that. I don't know whether he actually committed it or not. He's been credibly accused of killing a girl. However, I don't know if it's that or some things in his personal life, but whatever it is, that is a hater. He's really transformed from a kind of thoughtful, clever, funny guy who had views to a guy who's just bent on destroying other people. And I think that grows out of the misery inside and the guilt that he feels over the things that he's done in his life, et cetera. And a much healthier way to deal with that, I mean, all of us have done things we feel guilty about, I certainly have, is to admit them and kind of let them fall away, let the guilt fall away, and just move forward as a whole person. But someone like Scarborough just can't do it. And it's bad for the country when people like that have national platforms, I think.
Do you think he's sort of doing become a Democrat spokesperson because there's actually a lot less accountability if you're doing the bidding of the left? I mean, it feels like if you're a conservative, Tucker Carlson, if you were an academic, would not be getting the same treatment at Harvard as Claudine Gay is at Harvard for the same thing, for the same gross incompetence, for plagiarism, et cetera. I mean, is there a life jacket to doing the bidding of the radical left today?
There's no doubt about it, but I think it's bigger than partisan. I mean, it's not just that Scarborough is a defender of the Democratic Party, which obviously he is, that whole channel is, but it's more than that. He's an advocate for destroying things, for destroying families, individuals. I mean, if you're arguing for castrating kids or for appointing like a flagrant moron like Claudine Gay to the presidency of Harvard, the most famous, prestigious university in the world, what are you doing? Well, you're wrecking things. You're breaking things that you didn't build. You are advocating for destruction. If you're pushing some totally pointless foreign war like the war in Ukraine that Ukraine cannot win, then the only real effect is the total destruction of that country and an entire generation of men. And if you're quarterbacking that, even in the face of the dead certain knowledge it won't work, but you're still calling for more Ukrainians to die, what are you doing? Well, of course, you're serving evil. You're serving the destruction of other people and of institutions that were worth having but are now gone. And that's kind of where Joe finds himself. So I think it's deeper than partisan. I think there's something spiritual going on here.
What about Bill Kristol? I mean, you started off, working for him, and he's taken that same approach. But I mean, this is someone that at least at a time would have been a noted conservative scholar. It feels like he's literally, a full-blown, not even like, Kennedy-type Democrat. He's a full-blown radical, Marxist.
He is. And what's interesting about Kristol, he's very much like Claudine Gay. Both are the beneficiaries of affirmative action. Both occupy places they haven't earned and have reputations they didn't earn. And neither one is a scholar. Both are kind of midwits. I mean, Kristol's above average intelligence, certainly not a genius, but neither one of them has ever written a book. Bill Kristol is a scholar. He's a PhD from Harvard, but he's never written a single book. And he's not a good writer. I mean, he had a column for the New York Times, which they canceled because he couldn't write a 750-word column twice a week. So he's not that bright. He's kind of dumb. I mean, he's smarter than most people probably, but he's hardly a genius. He's hardly a scholar. His whole life is a pose. And he's really angry about it. I mean, if you take someone and put him in a position he hasn't earned, he got there because of his dad, of course, Irving Kristol. He was the son of a famous guy. And you put him in this position and you give him accolades he hasn't earned, he knows that. And so he feels bad about himself and he takes that rage out on other people. And so Kristol doesn't really, I worked for him for 5.5 years, so I know what he's like. Yeah. And he's a hater, and he absolutely hates Christian conservatives for sure, above all. And once you understand that, you can kind of see what this is really about. It's not about conservatism or helping America. It's about crushing and suppressing certain people because of their religious faith and their ethnicity. That's what he's really about.
Okay, so as someone who perhaps sits in a similar situation, right? I have a father that's incredibly accomplished. He's done things in all sorts of walks of life. How would you view, what's your analysis of me as being different than that? Because you've seen that can destroy certain people. So is my, when I go out there and fight for all these things, I'm curious to see what the Tucker analysis is on that one.
You want an honest analysis? I'll give it
seriously.
to you. So you're born into a family that was famous for business, okay, and had a company with your name on it. Be pretty easy to stay with that. And that's probably not a good thing, actually. I mean, if you're really into it and really great at it, do it. But you did something that is your salvation and the salvation of all of us, which is you followed your gifts and your actual enthusiasms. You're like, the two things I love politics and I love the outdoors. I love hunting and fishing. And you decided to master those and you had a natural aptitude for it. You left a more comfortable path, which was kind of guaranteed because literally your name's on the company. And you're like, I'm going to go into this thing I've never done before, but I just love it. Your dad runs for president. You get hauled out as a surrogate. You don't have a ton of experience in it. And you're like, wow, this just feels right. I'm really passionate. And that's why you're like a normal person who's not controlled by your insecurities. As distinct from someone like Claudine Gay, who's like, oh shit, I'm the president of Harvard. I'm not very smart. And she knows she's an imposter. Same with Bill Kristol. You're like, no, I love this. It's like real.
It's interesting.
And people can feel it on you.
People, like, well, it's so brutal, all the investigations. I was like, no. I got a chance to sort of remake myself in my late 30s. Not everyone gets that chance. Yes. So it is unique. And it was sort of like as brutal as it's been, as costly as it's been. It was definitely easier being the son of a beloved billionaire in New York City, right? You go to all the cool people parties.
Exactly.
That was easy.
Exactly.
This is harder, but it's much more meaningful.
But you genuinely like it. So that's the key. If you take a man and you force him down a path he's not suited for and that he doesn't really love, you'll destroy that man. Mm-hmm. You got to do things. And we were talking off air in your personal life. Look, you're deeply committed to your non-professional interests. Like you really love them. And that's another sign of balance and health is someone who's not only about his job, who cares about other things like his family or in your case, hunting and fishing, and I share those loves, so I know it, but it could be anything. It could be you're a secret watercolorist or you love to sing opera or whatever. As long as it's real, as long as it's your actual passion and ability, then you'll make it. You'll survive. You won't be distorted. But Bill Kristol, he's posing as a writer. He literally can't write. Like, imagine the hell of that.
That's got to be pretty brutal. I mean, I'm not a writer, but I got a couple of bestsellers, so I guess I'm doing better than Bill Kristol. But
yes, you are.
So you've transcended, it's not just politics anymore. You're dealing with businessmen. You're dealing with pop culture. You've figured out how to meld all of those things together. So, who's the smartest of all the people that you've sat down with? Who's that smartest business person, politician, whatever it may be that you've interacted with? And then conversely, who's the dumbest that, people may not think would be dumb?
That's such a great question. I've been thinking a lot about this. So I grew up like you in an affluent zip code and lived in one my whole life until a few years ago, lived in DC for 35 years. And there's this massive premium on IQ. You're smart. That's like the highest compliment you can pay a person. He's smart. And I really have come to see the limitations in that. I think IQ matters and it's real and it's mostly hereditary. That's all true. However, that's not really the measure of a man, both morally or in the marketplace even. The most successful businessmen I know are not the ones who had the highest scores in the SAT. They're the wisest. Wisdom is the goal, not intelligence, wisdom. There are an infinite number of possibilities in front of you. Which do you choose? That can't be calculated by a McKinsey formula. You can't call BSG to figure that out for you. You need to know it on a gut level, and you need to obey what you know. You need to follow your own instincts. And so the really good one, Dana White comes to mind as one of them. Is Dana White, did he get a higher score in the SAT than, I don't know, pick your corporate chieftain? Probably not. Yeah. But as Mike Tyson famously said, everybody got a plan until you get hit in the face. Mm-hmm. And when Dana White got hit in the face during COVID, he zagged when everyone else zigged. He went in the opposite direction. But you can't do that. And he's like, no, I have to do this. And he did it. and it made his sport predominant. It's when the crisis hits, that's when you know who somebody is. All the rest of it is just bullshit. All the rest of it is just the product of some meeting where smart people got together to play in the future, and none of it means a thing. It's only when there's a true crisis, like someone leaks your Access Hollywood video or COVID hits or whatever. How do you behave then? And so those are the guys I respect a lot.
Who are the dumbest?
Oh, I mean, the guys who run AB, I would say, have to be, basically the people who run General Motors. Are you joking? It's like, oh, we're not going to sell you trucks anymore that run on gasoline or diesel. Like, are you kidding? That's your whole business. Like anyone who gets talked into something insane. And I will say, my father used to say this when we were kids. He would say all the really bad ideas come from the geniuses because they're so counterintuitive. They're so against nature. They're so against the natural order and what's obvious that you really need to be an intellectual to fall for them. And so hey, I have an idea. Let's get rid of money and reorganize the society on an agrarian basis and murder everyone who wears eyeglasses. That was the Khmer Rouge program. But it wasn't conceived by peasants. It was conceived by school teachers and intellectuals. The smartest people in Cambodia came up with the killing fields. Of course, the peasants never would have come up with something like that. They'd be like, well, some people need eyeglasses. They never could have convinced themselves of something that dumb.
Well, no, I mean that's manifesting itself so much right now, where you see sort of the illusion of academia at Harvard. You realize well, no, everything's a DEI program. You can't get in there. The feeling I had for my Penn and Wharton diploma, it doesn't mean anything anymore. And it's something 10 years ago I would have been proud of. Today you realize we even had a saying back then. B is for billionaire, because you're right. The guys that they figured out a system did a lot better than the guys that were so brilliant they got A's and everything, but they never really. They were always trapped within that. And you talk about this sort of general thing where, the fake white collar economy, right? COVID lockdowns sort of exposed it more than ever. And, when your whole job is reduced down to, sitting in your bed in your boxer shorts, unlike a couple people maybe pleasuring themselves on conference calls, former colleagues of yours and, competitors in the media space, what's going on with that? It's sort of a reality check when we realize what's happening in our lives, in corporate America. We have fake email jobs that don't really matter. You've talked about this a lot, but I think it has a drastic effect on losing the sense of meaning and purpose that is such a big part of people's day-to-day life. How do you see what's going on there right now?
Well, I think it's all, fruit from the same tree. It's all the product of generational affluence. And you see this in families, most obviously. There's the innovator, the hard worker, the bootstrap guy who creates the business, makes the family fortune, and then the family becomes successively less impressive with every generation. And I have to say, since you invited it, you asked me to analyze you and your family.
I'm in.
Looking back, the best thing that ever happened to your family probably was the suffering that you've gone through, the loss of money that you guys have gone through in the last 5 years. That gives you purpose and gives you meaning and sharpens you and makes you live a purposeful life because you have no choice. If that doesn't happen, if you just live off trust disbursements every month, and I've seen this frankly in my own family, but I've seen it in many other families, you become contemptible and you become weak and silly and ridiculous and you don't even know it. And in the end, you become self-destructive. And that is the story of rich families. The fourth generation are always killing themselves, you know what I mean, with alcoholism or whatever, literally shooting themselves. So that's true in countries as well. And so if you have 80 years of uninterrupted economic growth and prosperity, which is the story of America after 1945, then of course you're going to get to a place where the entire ruling class is so decadent and silly and can't see themselves clearly enough to know that it's going to come tumbling down. Yeah. I mean, it's that strong men make good times aphorism is actually real. And I'm just sorry that my children have to live in the middle of it. I kind of like the world I grew up in.
But you broke out of it. I mean, you and I are that way as well, right? You grew up in your father was like an ambassador and high up in the government and did these things. You grew up in a DC sort of environment around that, just like I grew up. I'm supposed to go to Penn and, graduate from Wharton and be a liberal in New York City, go to the rich people parties. And yet, I mean, I guess we sort of both broke out of that. We had personas that were very different than that in our real lives. What made you sort of go counterculture to sort of, your predetermined destiny that, that should have happened and sort of engulfs 95% of probably the kids that we grew up with?
Well, I mean, two things. One was just temperamental, like I'm just too arrogant or something. I just didn't want to have to repeat the slogans. I want to say what I think is true. I don't have to say everything I think is true. I don't have the need to like spill all my thoughts, some of which are stupid and crazy probably. But I didn't want to have to repeat someone else's bumper sticker. And like over time, I just wouldn't. I'm not doing that. Okay, so that was the first thing. And the second thing, which is even more transformative, is I realized that the world that these people were aspiring to or occupying wasn't that great, actually. Yeah. And I didn't like
highly overrated.
It's so overrated. Like, how much room service can you eat? How many weeks can you spend in St. Bart's? Is flying private really that awesome? It's fine. It's not that great, actually. And what I really loved, and speaking for myself, was nature. Like I was just, I mean this from my heart, I would be a lot happier in a cabin, which I have with no electricity or running water, than I would be at the Four Seasons fill in the blank exotic destination. I just really felt that way. I appreciated the beauty of the natural world far more than I appreciated the trappings of wealth. And so you realize like the thing that everybody wants in the end, it's better than grinding poverty. It's better than being in debt.
Oh, of course.
I think, of course. But it's not that great, and it's not salvation. And for me, what really was salvation, this sounds cheesy, but I really mean it, was to be like fishing with my kids on a stream with no one else around. Like that was the highest level for me and remains, or bird hunting with my dogs, who I really, really love. And I see my dogs working in this weird ballet in the quail field. And I'm like, I don't think I've ever been happier. So once you decide that that's what you want, then none of this other shit means anything at all. Yeah. It's like, what are you going to give me to obey? I don't want what you have, actually. Yeah. And I mean it.
But what are the games that they're going to try to do? They see this coming. They see the polling. They see the populist uprising, not just here, not just with, youth that would, historically have been far more favorable to the Democrats. You say it with African Americans. I'd love to believe it, but I do see it differently. I see it when I speak at these things. There's a security guard in the back be like, hey, man, we've been lifelong Democrats. We're sick of this crap. So, it's always sort of the holy grail. You think it's going to happen this time in our administration. The administration, they did a lot for that. Didn't really change it a little bit. He did better than other Republicans. But I think now the persecution, the multiple, as you said, 700,000, whatever it is, years in jail, people are getting it, and they realize that they're in line as well. They're going to come after him. So how hard are they going to press to have this happen? Or they say, hey, it's 4 years. We're not going to play those games. And we'll take it over then.
Do you see any scenario that they would allow Donald J. Trump to return to 1600 Pennsylvania? That's what I ask myself every day.
Not even a little bit. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. But no. I know better because I know what they tried to do to me and everyone else in my family.
But this is my point. Trump has this movement, and he's the first to admit this. This movement that he's led and innovated is bigger than him. He's got not just a political movement. This has now become a cultural movement. You could see that in South Carolina the other day. You could see this at the UFC fights. You could see it anywhere you go and talk on the streets with the signs, with everything. He is leading now the most fundamental, important political, cultural movement in the nation for people of every economic class, every ethnicity, race, religion, to say, yes, we want to return America to her former greatness, and we know we have a struggle to do it, but this is the guy that's the armor-piercing shell. Now let's break it down to three things, how they're going to stop that. Because I think they've got three verticals. They're all going to converge on a point to stop Trump. Number one is to use lawfare. I mean, think about it for a second. Just step back and think about it. For a guy who gave us 4 years, and I don't care if you hate the sound of his voice, just look at the empirical evidence. In a chaotic world of anarchy, right, and destruction, he gave us 4 years of peace and prosperity. And I mean real prosperity. People don't give him credit that you talk about the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve being $9 trillion today. When President Trump took over, it was 3.5. It was only 880 billion when Obama took over. He added all those trillions, as you remember, to put liquidity in the system. President Trump by 18 and 19 had 3.5% growth, the lowest unemployment, low interest rates, no inflation, and he took $1 trillion. Yellen, as the Federal Reserve Chair, took $1 trillion liquidity off the balance sheet. He had a headwind that he was doing it because he wanted to deflate the asset bubble. He gave us peace. He gave us prosperity, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not easy in a chaotic world. Now, to that, number one, the 700 years in prison, I mean, we mock it, but they're serious about it.
Oh, no. It's not a joke. If they could do it, they would do it. I mean, it's laughable because you're like, what? People can't even figure out the crimes. Like New York, they want to fine them $1 billion, but there's no actual victim, right? The banks are saying, like, what are you talking about? Of course we do our own due diligence. Of course we got paid back. There wasn't a payment missed. We made hundreds of millions in interest, but it doesn't matter because you have a radical Democrat partisan attorney general that will say it doesn't matter.
Don Jr., of all of them, I think New York's the most egregious because New York, I'm sitting there going, I did this for 30 years of my life at Goldman Sachs, my own firm. I go, it looks like pretty normal course of business what the Trump organization did.
At Goldman Sachs, did you ever not do diligence? And by the way, even in post like Sarbanes-Oxley 2002, post 2008 crisis, if a major bank like Deutsche Bank, $1 trillion bank, if they didn't do diligence, the opening that they would have for class action lawsuits from any investor would be ludicrous. So the whole notion's absolutely insane. But that's the point, Steve, I guess, and it's probably the point you're making, which is it doesn't matter.
The judge is so blatant about they just want to get to his assets and stripping. But let's go back to the criminal charges. We had people on today because I'm trying to go through battleground state by battleground state about how we're not secure for this election right now to actually close the deal and make sure we get the deal. You're going to win like you did in 2020 with 74 million votes that we have to close. And quite frankly, it's a little chaotic. In Fulton County, it's absurd of what's going on there. Yeah. They still get criminal charges. The judge in D.C. is locked in on a 4 March start. It would normally take years to get these things going. They've taken this process and they want to either through opportunity costs, so he can't focus, he can't campaign, to either take all the money out of the campaign, have to spend it on lawyers, or maybe just grind him down in the process and take his mind off running for president. It's absolutely egregious. So that's their first line is hardcore lawfare. And also at that to take the 14th Amendment. And these 14th Amendment cases are jokes legally, but they're not jokes for political psyops. Correct. Because they want to dominate local media with maybe Trump isn't an insurrection. You look at Denver media when the trial was an absolute joke. Kash Patel went in there and eviscerated it. This is why I think Speaker Johnson has to come back. And we need two things. We need serious action on the impeachment of Biden, not for political retribution. We need to do this because we can't let foreign powers like the CCP and whoever these crooks are in Ukraine be funneling money back into politicians that are doing their bidding. Number one, that has to be out there. Number two, I think Speaker Johnson has to reconstitute the J6 committee. The footage alone and what President Trump, if you look at Kash Patel's testimony, President Trump went out of his way to ensure there would be a safe Capitol. Bowser and Pelosi and others went out of the way to make sure there wasn't a safe Capitol. That has to be adjudicated in a formal process. We need J6. And this time, we have to let the Democrats have a ranking member, and we have to have them minority counsel. They have to see the evidence and cross-examine the witnesses. You can't have Cassie Hutchinson up there talking crazy talk and not be cross-examined. Any witness that would come forward has to be crossed by the Democrats. And what you're going to see is the American people all of a sudden are going to see about a Fedsurrection, are going to see how this was all fixed on January 6th. That is going to be the next part of the Great Awakening, and that's where the push. The other thing is they had an article in the Washington Post today about the RNC, and the RNC saying, oh, yeah, we're broke, but we're in 70 lawsuits. Mark Elias, the demon. And look, he's brilliant, he's cunning, he's smart like a serpent, but he's a demon. He says, by the way, we're involved in 650 lawsuits, and the Republican Party is only named in 28. These guys don't know what they're doing. The Mark Elias is the world, and he gave the roadmap for how 2020 was going to be stolen. He put out the Transition Integrity Project, which Bill McGinley, Raheem Kassam broke down. We went around the country, most of it in Zoom because of the pandemic, but he walked through the mail-in ballots. They walked through actually how they were going to steal the election in broad daylight. This is going to happen again. They have taken a blood oath among themselves that no matter how Trump does it, and how Trump gets to victory, he will never set foot back in the White House again, because they understand day one, it's the deconstruction of the administrative state. It's the ripping apart of the rogue element of the deep state. Mm-hmm. It's setting Wall Street and Silicon Valley back in the proper places. It's the reinstitution of a program to return America to a form of greatness and make the citizen America first and American citizens first. And they will fight that to their death. Okay, to stop President Trump coming back. That's why when people talk about the most important election, this is more than an election. This is actually the taking back of the country from the powers that have driven it to the ground. And that's why 2024 is going to be like 2024 and 25, 26 are going to be like no 3 or 4 years in American history.
Yeah, like talk a little bit about it, because you're right with Elias and the lawfare and the things that they're doing, but talk about, you had to deal with this from the administration standpoint and dealing with the RNC, and you understand those are different things, but what do you make out about that report saying they're low in cash, they can't raise money? Because I mean, it feels like I see it for the campaign. There's a lot of enthusiasm for Trump. Talk about that delta so people understand the differences and what are the changes you'd make.
First off, Don Jr., think about it. In the next 10 days, we have Fox News and Hannity putting on a national debate with Ron DeSantis and Newsom, like national figures, and some presidential kind of mock presidential debate to put them out in front of the country as actually guys that could lead this country, which is outrageous. A week after that, they're in Alabama again, the RNC being dead broke. And this is not me saying this or Don Jr. Yeah. This is the Washington Post going through the numbers and showing they got $9 million cash on hand and no small donors, because nobody watches your show, watches our show, going to hit you with a 50. They'll hit Trump with a $50 bill, but they're not hitting the RNC. They're putting on another bogus debate, which nobody watches, for the simple reason if they feel that if some existential event like J6 or something like that hits Trump, or the bankruptcy trial, they've got somebody ready to go. They can push either harder, but more importantly, they want to consolidate that 15% of Republican voters are just traditional Romney types that are anti-Trump. They want to consolidate that around a Nikki Haley type and drive it all the way through the primary process. And then in July of 2024, force Nikki Haley onto the ticket as Trump's running mate and let her try to run the administration from number 2. Now, that's not going to happen, but that's their plan. And the RNC,
that would be a disaster.
The Washington Post, she ought to resign. My candidate to run the RNC is you. It's been you since back. It should have been you immediately upon winning in 2016. We made a huge mistake letting Ronna take this from Reince. She's been a total disaster. It's time now for a business guy that can step up there that people respond to, particularly if they don't get the small donor. They don't get the small donor program up and running again. The RNC has no chance. It has no cash. It has $9 million of cash right now, and it's bleeding out cash on things like this bogus debate in Alabama. And they're going to do another one, and they're going to do another one, and they're going to do another one, all to stop Trump.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm watching the debates, and it was interesting. I was talking to a good friend of yours, Andy Sarabian, earlier today, and I'm like, I feel like, we're like 50 days out from Iowa caucuses, and it's like, honestly, it sounds like people are bored. Like, it's sort of a foregone conclusion, and that's why it's one thing to have the debates if there was something, right? I get it when Ron DeSantis influencers, made it, clipped him to turn him into a legend and whatever. And then I was like, just wait till you see him in long form. I can assure you it won't be nearly as good as when they do like a 5-second clip. Turns out I was right. The second he actually had to take the mic, it was a nosedive. But you're right. They're forcing these debates for, I mean, at this point, it's like for a distant second place, or maybe, for the future dog catcher position. It is lunacy that they're doing it. I mean, the all-time low viewership, but worse, they're going to like MSDNC and NBC News. They're going to liberal places with liberal moderators, trying to get them to have a floor plate to dump on conservative values for these guys, and everyone's going for it hook, line, and sinker. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense.
It only makes sense. And by the way, Sarabian is one of the smartest guys in politics I know. But your thing about being bored, first, I want to miss this. Vanderplat's, in the old days, Vanderplat's endorsement, it would be the political talk for a week.
Yeah.
Right.
No one gives a crap who he is. No difference whatsoever.
I think everybody's paying attention to it now. Your father's beating on him, right?
Yeah.
If your father didn't beat on him, it would be crickets, total crickets. Nobody cares. And the reason is they know and Rove the other day, I think, gave the Murdoch warning to DeSantis that, dude, if you don't win in Iowa, you got to get out. They want to clear the field for Nikki Haley right now. They feel Christie performed his function. DeSantis didn't have it. They're all over Nikki Haley. And you saw the other day in the football stadium, right? I mean, come on. I mean, President Trump, Bigfooter, it's just not going to happen. All of these debates right now, everything they're doing in this fake primary is to try to either slow Trump down, I think actually help Biden or Newsom. I mean, it can't be random that Hannity and Fox are having Newsom on in a national debate to try to promote him as a national candidate. So everything is to do slow down President Trump, hurt President Trump, or in addition, make sure that a Nikki Haley type sits there and starts to negotiate in July. Oh, we can bring the party together, but we have to have a say-so in the administration, which cannot happen. She's absolutely poisonous. And as she's more ambitious than Lucifer.
Imagine how much. Hey, it's Rumble, so I'll say it. Imagine how much motherfucking would go on if it was Nikki Haley and her team, what they'd be trying to do to Trump behind his back from literally like first second, like to position herself for 2028. I mean, listen, that would be brutal. But no, you're 100% right. I mean,
also hold it, hang on, you're not going to get so easy. You're going to hit the bid here on the RNC.
No, listen, I'm with you. It's not working. It's not working. There does have to be a change. You need to satisfy the people. The problem is this. The RNC, when we got into this in 2016, they did a great job. They had an operation. They did this. But like they too weren't really looking for it. You and I were both there because you and I were the only people that spoke up. It was 2016. It was a couple of weeks before the election. And you had the Access Hollywood tapes.
Billy Bush weekend.
Yep. Billy Bush weekend. That was a long fucking weekend. Okay. And I get it, but it was a long weekend only because, we believe what the news told us still at that point in time. And we sat there in my dad's living room.
I give a hat tip to Jared because Jared actually we rented the Hilton Ballroom to try to tell candidate Trump at the time, don't do the ABC interview. We can get 1,000 red hats into the Hilton Ballroom in Midtown. But there was three of us that basically said you got to throw down. The RNC wanted to cut and run and have what?
Yeah, no. RNC literally said you should just get out now and concede and lose, or you'll lose in 2 weeks and it'll be worse. I mean, I remember that was Reince Priebus. And I'm sitting there being like, wait, I don't know, man. I'm not getting out of a fight. We got 2 weeks. Like, it may suck. It was brutal. It could be brutal, but like, we ain't quitting now. I spent way too many hours all over the place, all on the road to sit there and give up, 10 days out. And so you and I were the ones being like, this is, what do you, like, I can't even believe we're having this conversation. And he didn't. And listen, on Monday,
that was the biggest not knowing how to read the room. Trump, he sits there and goes, you can either drop out now or you're going to lose by the biggest landslide in history. We're like 3 weeks out. I mean, Trump's a fighter. What are you going to do? You're going to walk away with 3 weeks to go over some locker room. Remember, we said
that was where locker room talk came up. And it's 100% right. And I still remember like the press was brutal. Everyone's crushing you. It was all they had. And I remember I went back on the road on Monday and it was actually to Iowa. And I gave a speech, and it was like, me, I'm usually pretty high energy. This was less than high energy. I was sort of lackluster. I was, you didn't want to be there. You think you're getting your ass kicked. And three ladies, like proper, good God-fearing Iowa patriotic ladies, pulled me aside after the speech and go, Sugar, I know why you're upset, and you're not that high energy today. Honestly, my girlfriends and I had 10 times that conversation earlier today, and it was like, no one gives a shit. You only cared because the media turned it into a big deal.
Yes.
Everyone has had these conversations, maybe with the exception of Bob Vander Plaats, but again, no one gives a shit about Bob Vander Plaats. Those people are irrelevant in the party. So in 2016, when the establishment was 90% of the party, that methodology maybe worked. Today, 90% of the party is America first. They could care less about Republican Party or if the RNC collapsed as an institution, they wouldn't care. Now, there are components of it. There are things that, you need that to be a functioning system. So listen, you need to get that going because also, hey, and I can tell you from experience, I don't want to win the presidency if I don't think we can also win the House and the Senate, because my life will be 4 more years of Russia version 2.0 or 12.0 at this point. It'll be impeachment after impeachment. I got to win the House races too. I want to win school board races. I want to sweep the board because I understand what all of those things mean. And so it's not just about the presidency for me. If it was, we could focus on that, but we need those institutions to make sure that you can get guys in these congressional seats over the line, in governor's races, over the line, again, school board, all the way down the board. So that's an important thing. And that's why you need those things to be there, because a Trump campaign, they can drag some people across a line, but you don't have the time, energy, resources to be able to focus on those individual races. That's why you have those big institutions. So we need to get that going.
And we don't need personal grievances in Washington. We need people that stand up, do the right thing every single time. And, Don, that's why I wrote my book. I wanted people to understand what happens behind the scenes. And I wanted people to know the stories behind the headlines that they read about me, like Jewish space lasers and many other outrageous things, So
by the way, even like I said, I started a publishing company to make sure that everyone had a voice. And but even I should know. But I was like, I saw the Jewish. I was like, we got to discuss this one. And you lay it out, and it's actually factually 100% accurate. But not the way it's been spun, right? So the story of that is great. It's in here. There's details, and hey, at the time that was before what we even saw happen in Hawaii. So who the heck knows, right?
That's right. Nobody knows. But the good news is I tell that story in the book, and I also voted to fund Israel's lasers. So they're actually pretty cool.
Now, one of the other things I saw this week, and again, I want, this new speakers, he's endorsed Trump, MAGA Mike, but I also saw the thing well, we don't really have any evidence to go forward with an impeachment inquiry on Joe Biden. I'm like, what? I saw, is that a real quote, or was I being punked? Because I saw that and I'm like, what do you mean? His grandchildren are getting CCP wire transfers. What are you talking about? Hunter's ex-girlfriend. Hunter wasn't an international businessman. Are we still that naive? And that's, again, and maybe that's what I'm worried about. It's just that we're that naive. No. There's a totally plausible reason for why Joe's getting hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there's no evidence other than the photo, other than the wire transfer, other than the emails, other than 87,000 emails written by Joe Biden under an alias name, other than, there was nothing on Trump, and we got 5 years of Russia. By this time in the Biden administration, I had done 50 hours of testimony for treason, a crime punishable by death, and they're like, there's nothing here. But this is coming from our people. There's nothing. There could be nothing more clear, and it just we're playing such a different game. It's sad.
No, it's terrible. And just like you outlined, I'm on the oversight committee. I am deeply involved into the impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden, and it shouldn't be an impeachment inquiry that's dismissed at all. It's one that should end with impeachment as soon as possible, because we have the evidence, we have the bank statements, we have the checks. We have the proof of money laundering where Joe Biden got paid by his brother, James Biden, and we sourced the money directly back to the CCP. This is not made up. It's not a conspiracy theory like Russian collusion, and it's not a political persecution like the government has done to you, your brother, your father, your sister, your entire family, and everyone that has worked for you all. It's outrageous, and we need a Speaker of the House that isn't walking around expecting everyone to follow the words of the Bible. We need a Speaker of the House, and we need Republicans in Congress that realize what we're facing. And this is a communist takeover of our country, and we're going to end up like Brazil next and many other countries where they take away your right to run for office, which they're trying to do to your father. They tried to do it to me. They tried to take me off the ballot back in 2022. These are not little nice handshakes and nice to meet you, and we're all getting along in Washington times. This is not the Democrat Party that Ronald Reagan dealt with. This is the Communist Democrat Party, and I agree with you. We need people to get on board, and that comes from the top. MAGA Mike needs to get on board and fight the Communist Democrats.
Yeah, listen, I wish everyone, followed the words of the Bible a little bit more carefully, but if we're doing that while the other side is laughing at us, Same with the Constitution. We do, oh no, the Constitution says this. They're like, yeah, okay. Yeah, ha ha ha. While they use, every law, they've taken over the FBI, they've taken over the DOJ, they've weaponized it against their opponents. And again, I keep going back to the word naivete. I'd love to pretend we're playing the same game, but like the nice God-fearing, I'm a God-fearing man myself, but like if we're playing this game while, Satan is running his playbook, we can't win. It's just not, it's not even a fair fight at this point. And I think that's what it is. The biggest frustration we see from a lot of Americans stems from, I guess, what my father calls sort of all talk, no action, right? We say we're going to do this and we're going to put, it actually happened. That's different. How many Republicans, to your impeachment inquiry, Mayorkas, we must impeach. Darrell Issa, who voted against it, this week, last week, had tweeted, we can't wait to speak to him at his impeachment inquiry. Then he votes against it. We saw 8 Republicans, like I said, Darrell Issa and 7 other Republicans. They didn't vote to impeach Mayorkas, who's literally allowing sex trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking to flow across our border. It's literally killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. And 8 Republicans, now we can't do that. And there's all the technicality. I don't believe maybe it lines. Like, this is a clear and present danger to the United States of America. This clown is in charge. He's allowing it to happen. He's doing nothing. He's lying and saying there's no problem at the border. It's wonderful and secure. And 8 Republicans are still like, well, I don't know. It's not very nice if we impeach him. How do you reconcile that? Obviously you've been a big champion of the border policies. How does the book take readers behind the scenes to understand just how inept and how corrupt the swamp really is?
Yeah, in my book, I wrote the stories that tell you behind the scenes where you think you see the most conservative Republicans. Well, I out the ones that call themselves conservatives, but they're actually conserving nothing, because they aren't doing anything, just like those 8 Republicans. Let's break that down. 8 Republicans voted to protect Mayorkas and helped him keep his job. Well, 8 of them, out of that 8, 4 of them, including Darrell Issa, serve on the Judiciary Committee, where my articles of impeachment were already sitting on a shelf collecting dust, and they weren't moving them at all. And so they voted with the Democrats to send them back to the Judiciary Committee, where they go back on the shelf, and they start collecting dust again. Darrell Issa said that I'm a hardworking member of Congress, but I lack maturity. Well, I had 2 of my constituents killed in Texas 2 weeks ago when a 17-year-old working for the cartels was smuggling illegal aliens into Texas, and it murdered these 2 innocent Americans, lovely couple with 5 children. Their children will never get to see them again, never got to say goodbye. And Secretary Mayorkas had a smug look on his face when I held up their picture yesterday at the Homeland Committee hearing. He had no apologies, no remorse, nothing to say for this couple that was killed. And he even said that the word invasion is offensive to him. The word invasion is offensive to him, but yet 8 Republicans can't vote to impeach him. And Darrell Issa is a former chairman of the Oversight Committee.
Invasion. Like, why on earth would you not take those precautionary measures unless, of course, you wanted something to happen? I mean, that's literally, these are not conspiracies theories anymore. Like, it's literally the only plausible solution, right? It's not like you have to go out on a limb to get there. So, it's insane. And like I said, you were in the room. We've had that conversation before. But, the mainstream media, there's no one fact-checking them lying about it. Like, you're literally in the room. It's documented. It's there. And it doesn't matter because, Trump did it. Like, if it helps Trump, if it helps the case, if it helps the case of the January 6ers themselves, it can't have happened because that goes against the narrative that they've weaponized to get everything that they want.
No, you're right. And I'll just touch back to that interview. I forget the lady's name, the new Meet the Press lady, Welker maybe or something, that DJT had the interview with this past weekend. And she goes to him, did you as the president authorize any other security for January 6th? As if she doesn't know the answer to that question. He, as the president, is forbidden by the Constitution from authorizing any other security outside of the National Guard. And the Supreme Court has declared unilaterally that even when the president authorizes the National Guard, the state and the mayor and the governor, Pelosi and Bowser here, have to ask for it. Because if they didn't, it would be an unconstitutional invasion. And then they switch. It's the same narrative they had back in Russiagate. You guys are lying. The FISA court's great. The FBI is the best. Donald Trump's evil. And then she moves on to the next narrative. Why is it on Nancy Pelosi? As if her entire crew of 1,000 people didn't know Posse Comitatus. Who wants a president to be able to unilaterally deploy uniformed military soldiers in the United States of America? No one, literally, except Meet the Press. And when you take that and you couple it with, and I remind people of this, actually, I don't know if I've really ever talked about this. On January 6th, when Nancy Pelosi finally came to her senses, and in the late afternoon asked for the National Guard, she called us the next minute and said, where are they? As if I had them, in my back pocket. The National Guard are teachers, lawyers, parents, cops.
You need to mobilize them. They don't magically appear when you snap your fingers.
But the next part is the part you'll like the most. She said, well, I want congressional food services restored so my members can eat. Before the election security shenanigans, she wanted food services restored. Mind you, by the way, she was too busy filming unlawfully her protege documentary about fleeing during January 6th in secure spaces with her daughter videotaping everything after we had already flown her to a secure space. This is what we had to deal with. And then they wanted us to bring in belt-fed machine guns, stuff you see in Kandahar. They wanted us to put it on Pennsylvania Avenue. And all of this is out there. And all of this is in my testimony, the SecDef's testimony, everything else. But the fake news is ginning it up again because they're running out of narratives right now. That we've defeated them with the truth on Russiagate. We've defeated them with the truth on impeachment 1 and 2. We've defeated them with the truth on all of Donald Trump's prosecutions and Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. So what do they have? They have their political dynamo, January 6th. And it's a coordinated strike. They are using that and the mainstream media to try to get us to remove Joe Biden, because even the Democrats are smart enough that they don't want that guy to run.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about, obviously you worked for Devin Nunes in Congress. You were, on an intel committee. You did all of this work. By this time in the Democrat-controlled Congress, I had done about, 50 hours of testimony before those things for, treason, minor details, a crime punishable by death, as we've discussed on this show many times. What do you think? And you've also been, on the conservative. They slow rolled you on Russiagate. You bring up the truth, they criticize you. It's different because of the way they've stacked the deck. But talk about that. What do you think's going on right now in Congress? Do you think they're being just slow rolled? Are they being just totally ineffective? Are they not being strong enough? What's going on?
I think it's a combination of the two. And if you'll allow me to use you, unfortunately, as an example, because when I was running Russiagate, you went through that interrogation and you firsthand saw them leaking lies about you in live time.
They literally changed the dates on my emails to try to create, he knew about it before instead of after. Get rid of the 1 in 14, it becomes the 4th, not the 14th. And if something happens on the 10th, it makes it seem like you had inside knowledge. So the problem is that wasn't the real email, but it didn't stop them from running with it. The walls are closing in.
No, remember the Trump Tower meeting where you guys talked about adopting children and facilitating that process? And Adam Schiff made it the Russian asset galore meeting. This is where it went down. Do you know what I find ironic and not at all surprising? How about when a sitting vice president has dinner at Cafe Milano with his son and the mayor of Moscow's wife after she piped him $3.5 million for a business deal? The mainstream media spent the last 8 years denying that meeting ever happened. And then when we got the records and the logs to show that that meeting happened, now they say, oh, Joe Biden had nothing to do with it. He was just there as a dinner partner.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what they would have done to you and your family if you sat down with the mayor of Moscow's wife after some company you're affiliated with got $3.5 million? This is the hypocrisy that we have to get out there and show them. As bad as it was for you, and this goes to your question, what Congress is doing right now is letting them get away with this. It's a two-tier administrative state. I'm not asking Congress to do 1,000 things. I'm really asking them to do a couple. Why haven't you subpoenaed Chris Wray and Merrick Garland and Hunter Biden? Why can't you just run hard at that target set and show the American people the documentation about the bank records, about the meetings, about the CCP, about the Ukraine, so the fake news mafia will stop saying, where's the evidence? And we're never going to correct the left and their 40%. But you know who we're going to win over with Donald Trump saying this week in and week out is the middle 10 to 15% that decides elections. And they're starting to come around. And the Democrats are now trying to have us impeach Biden and take him out. I've always said I think that's a mistake. I think we need to impeach Garland and Wray, the twin architects of the two-tier system of justice. That is the epicenter of the corrosion of justice. And it will get us the documentation. I also think we need to do simple things at Congress, like why does Leon Panetta, Michael Hayden, Deputy Director Morell, and 48 other former CIA and DOD officials have their security clearance that we taxpayers pay for when they were caught lying and rigging a presidential election? Do you know how easy it is to zero out that so they don't go into the private sector, which they're doing right now, tens of millions of dollars off that? Those find that F-35.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I mean, speaking of crazy, I got to get your reaction to the insanity out of Ukraine. You saw the trans spokesman for Ukraine's military is threatening to kill Russia propagandists. I mean, around the world. I mean, I guess that means if you say something they disagree with, they think they can just kill you now. And I mean, it appears to be more and more unhinged. I mean, we've seen this. It seems like an American as well, because they say they answer to the American taxpayer. So this could be taxpayer funded and or government sanctioned. And, you know, it never ends. How would you assess America's involvement in Ukraine at this point? And what do you say about this? How does the insanity of where our money goes inside the swamp, relate to, even your book? Because, I mean, this was like next level, like, oh my God, they're really doing this. Like, this is like the most unserious person in the world getting funded by this, but this is Ukraine policy? I don't even understand it.
Well, it goes back to the same corrupt part in the media. They've made this the calling card for the radical left and the Biden administration. And whether they're paying terrorists $6 billion, excuse me, for American hostages or spend $115 billion in Ukraine, everything's the same to them. It's all rainbows and gumdrops. Everyone's winning in America. Everything's great. But here's the reality. Not only do we have zero idea where our $115 billion went. By the way, my buddy just went to Ukraine, and he said the nightlife and the nightclubs and everything was the best he's ever seen anywhere in the world. This is what we're funding the Ukraine. And not only that, but Congress allowed Joe Biden to send $6 billion to the Ayatollahs in Iran, who are going to use it to directly fund terror against us. And they have the audacity to tell us we will monitor the funds like you did in the Ukraine, like you're doing with fighter jet. I mean, these guys can't find a plane. We want them to find 1,000 times that in financial assets overseas. Ukraine is the modern day Afghanistan. We have never been able to account for 50% of the funds out of Afghanistan, and we never will. And the same is going to happen to the Ukraine. And my prediction is when Biden is wiped out and Donald Trump is elected, they will somehow hang the $200 billion tag on Donald Trump's head for daring to try and help the Ukraine. But here's a scary fact that non-military, non-national security people need to know. We, the United States of America, have a finite amount of resources, missiles and technology to defend us and our allies around the world. Forget the $115 billion for a second that went to the Ukraine. Do you know how much of our missile defense system we've given to the Ukraine? As in, if we stopped today and tried to resupply, do you know how long it would take us to restore our surface-to-air missile programs? 7 years. 7 years. That means if there's a conflict, God forbid China invades Taiwan, or something happens in the Middle East, or Southeast Asia, or wherever, And they are calling us Americans to employ and deploy with them. We don't have the tech. We don't have the goods. We don't have the weapons. We've given them away. And this is too cute by a half for me, especially when I was chief of staff at DOD. This one really ticks me off. Oh, it's okay. There's no soldiers in the Ukraine. You know, America's not really there.
Well, it seems like there were. I mean, that whistleblower that leaked the information, I mean, it seems like we had boots on the ground. And then they caught him, and that story disappeared in an instant. Our media doesn't ask about it because I guess that would hurt Biden if he was waging a, beyond the proxy war that we've been waging, but an actual boots on the ground war in Eastern Europe. I mean, what could go wrong historically speaking? It's lunacy, and yet, that was a story for like a half a day. It seems it was obvious what we were doing, and then no one's even asked the question anymore. Just like we're not asking the question is our Ukraine policy dictated because maybe Ukraine actually has more dirt on the Bidens that could take them down, and therefore we'll spend, an infinite amount of money protecting the Bidens in a futile war that could escalate into something much worse, and, they got a wonderful trans spokesperson there. I mean, is the trans spokesperson thing, is that like, I guess because it's the big thing in Hollywood or whatever, I mean, is that how they try to make it okay? Because they're beyond reproach, you're not allowed to be critical of that? Because, I mean, you would think that in a serious situation, that may not be the person you lead with. I don't know.
Well, here's the other travesty. We're funding it. They don't have money for this stuff. We're funding his trips. He's here at the United Nations calling for more money and actually telling us Americans that if Ukrainians act out in the future and do bad things, it's going to be our fault for not giving enough. And we have rubes on Capitol Hill listening to this because they are wed to the defense industrial complex and bought and paid for by Raytheon and Lockheed and Northrop and Boeing. And I'm not saying those guys don't do good things, but they have made it an institution to cycle individuals in and out of Washington so that they have golden parachutes and they get the $100 billion contracts every year. And what ticks me off about the Ukraine is not just that we don't know where the money's going. That's okay, that would tick enough people off, period.
Hey, the same government that wants to go after your Venmo account if you spend more than $600 is okay losing half of $150 billion. Then the Pentagon, what was it? They lost $220 billion. I mean, this is not like a rounding error. This is real money. I mean, this is money that could fund, I mean, we could fix so many of our own problems here and there. Oh, we just lost it. Like, I'm sure it went to, create the next corrupt oligarch class in Ukraine and elsewhere. But like, oh my God. And again, our media, 220, it's, 220 billion. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? Our media doesn't even ask the question anymore. They blow off the answer and then they're like, oh, okay. I'll accept that as an answer. It's lunacy.
And the biggest lie is how we're not there. American contractors are on the ground. And I think soon we're going to find out the facts that uniformed officers are on the ground. Are we to believe that the American Congress and the American commander-in-chief are so stupid that they send $120 billion in equipment over and they send the Ukrainians an ABC manual translated into Russian and Ukraine on how to launch surface-to-air missiles? Who the heck's over there training them? Who's taking care of the equipment? Where does it go when it breaks? These are American service members and American contractors that are there. Maybe we are that stupid that we didn't send them. We just sent them the toys and we didn't send them the manning. But I've never seen that in my entire career at DOD or Intel or anywhere else. So we're going to find out that they're there. And going to about where should we spend the money, as Donald Trump has said, not just the border. We got 55,000 homeless veterans in this country, 24 of which take their own lives every week. I'd like to spend some money there. Maybe just like 10 million, to go across to their families in need, because we sent them overseas. They came back broken and we failed them. And to me, everywhere I go, that's what Americans want to do. But because we're being bamboozled by this Senate, by this Democrat and Republican, combination of factors, we are just lighting our taxpayer dollars on fire, which is again why if they're not going to do the work, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to go depose Rod Rosenstein. I'm going to go depose Chris Wray. I'm going to go take every one of their depositions and every one of their emails in this lawsuit, and I'm going to publicize it to the world so that they understand that our government has been taken over. It's not even a deep state. They're just like publicly out there having a party. And every time they hit the piñata, CNN puts them on for an interview. This is
that's the worst actors. There's not actually, you can lie before Congress. I mean, in many ways, Roseanne, the show, was prophetic, right? It showed how globalization could destroy economies of the Midwest, right? We're going to take your American dream and we're going to ship it to China so we can save half a cent on a widget, right? It decimated factory towns. It showed the impact of those terrible decisions by, globalist sort of, government officials and others, what that impact meant on a family. Back then, those types of working class patriots were probably more likely to be Democrats. But now, that Democrat Party doesn't exist. That Democrat Party is, making sure that your children are learning about the 9,476 genders. They don't need to learn math or who cares about that? We're going to teach them and program them.
That's really going to help them get a job.
Yeah. But now those people are Donald Trump supporters. So the disdain for them has come out even more. So at the time, when you were doing, and this is really even the original show. I mean, you were this was going on, and you saw it. But did you know that the show was sort of a warning of what the so-called elites were really trying to do? And what happened to these communities?
I did, and I kept feeling the whole time I was doing it, and I was fighting so hard. Because I do believe in some ways the medium is the message. And believe me, if they knew what I was doing, they never would let me do it. But they're so stupid, they didn't know what I was doing, thank God. But I was reaching out like a radio free America to the American people to tell them what I saw was coming. And I was in my head the whole time I was writing and doing, I felt like I was doing it for the next generation. As well as the people that were watching it then, but I felt like it was really for the children of the next generation when they would watch the reruns or whatever, which thank God they continued to do for all these almost 40 years. But it was a message for them because I knew that things were going to deconstruct and, fall apart. And I wanted them to have the message of that strong family. Not only is the father not an idiot, but the mother is not a submissive idiot either. They work together like the families of America do. The mother and the father work together, and that's like somehow not a good message anymore from people. Anyway, they each have a job to do, and it's for the future of the family to exist. So I always knew that they were going to attack that, and that I saw it. I saw the fathers leaving the home in my own community, whether to go to jail or to be killed or whatever. I grew up in a working class community, so I saw it. But it was like it was just so by design, and knowing my family coming from Europe and going through the Holocaust and everything, that this is always the way they do it. It isn't just America. It is always the way that the people at the top of the pyramid do things. That's how they do it. And they always attack at the bottom, not the top. Of course, never at the top.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about stand-up. Obviously, you were a comedian, but you also were one of the great sort of certainly females of stand-up, if not just stand-up, period. It seems like cancel culture and political correctness is a real threat to just even stand-up comedy these days. Because stand-up only works, in my opinion, if there's if you're free to tell sort of the uncomfortable truths. I think part of what makes it great is like you point out the thing that everyone knows but they can't really say. They went after you. They went after Dave Chappelle. Like one of the most brilliant. When I think of some of the skits from Chappelle Show. The Clayton Bigsby. The black white supremacist. I mean, like one of the greats of all time. You couldn't even imagine doing it today. And yet every couple of months I get on, one of the things is just to go play that because it was just so funny. They went after Rogan, and now, the guys that were regarded as being, great, but also perhaps even left, are now sort of moving to the right. I think maybe because they've been penalized. I mean, Rogan, when I think I don't think Rogan's a conservative. I think he's free to sort of think about different things and not be sort of stuck in one box. But the second he said something, even if it was like, this is what someone said, racist, and the people that he probably thought he was more aligned with tried to cancel him so quickly. Now, so for you, when you travel around the country doing stand-up, do you think that more comedians, think like you that are willing to admit it? Do you think the damage to comedy in general is so severe because they're not able to, to get there, right? They can't, what the punchline should be, but you can't quite do it because there are external forces working on you and they don't want to deal with the shit that they're going to have to deal with these days.
Well, I think that was true, and it continues to be true a lot of places all over the country. But Joe Rogan, which I always have to credit him, he started a club there in Austin, the Mothership, in honor of Mitzi Shore, who was kind of our comedy mom in every way, our spiritual comedy mom. And in that club there are comics who are keeping the spirit of comedy as the greatest weapon against the powers that be, the establishment. They're keeping that alive, and it's just so exciting to be part of it and to see how comics from all over the country are moving down there, including myself. That's why I moved to Texas, to be part of that. It's a great renaissance, and nobody's afraid of anything down there. It's zero woke tolerance, and the audience comes to be challenged in their thinking. They love it, and every place I go, I remember, me performing and, how the opinion of the audience has changed, whether that's because people saw me differently and I attracted a different audience, I don't know, but they love it. People love when you're breaking, you're like, pow, go right to the heart of it. They are standing and cheering for every joke. I'm getting multiple standing ovations. And when I perform at Joe's club, it's the same thing, and it is the same for the comics, Black, White, Asian, and Arab, that are working down there. It's like, no, we will not be contained. We ain't gonna bow to you. Comedy is a power unto its own. It's a gift from God, and people feel like they're on a quasi crusade to save it because it saves our country. To speak truth to power, they're not gonna shut us up. We'll never be shut up, so fuck them.
And honestly, how effective you've been at triggering the left, I totally understand why it's important to stay anonymous. So what do you think about some of that?
Well, I got on social media 4.5 years ago. Never been on social media before, and picked out the weirdest name, Cat Turd. Never thought I'd get 10 followers. And I really don't care about being anonymous as much as people think. I just think it's kind of funny now. It drives them crazy. It doesn't matter to me if people really know who I am. It never has. Yeah. But it just the more I do it, I think the funnier it is, and the more it gets to them.
Oh, dude, like I said, I'm looking at the live chat, and it's just absolutely lighting up. We love Cat Turd. You've done something sort of amazing. So how did it happen? Like I said, again, I do a lot on social, but I started off with a pretty good platform. My father, we were on The Apprentice. My father became president of the United States. That's a pretty good place to start. How did it happen for you that you got this incredible following? What started it? I mean, obviously you're not afraid to push buttons, but how do you get there, and how'd you do it so quickly?
I really don't know, but first I want to say that America has been saved today. I don't know if anybody knows this. Joe Manchin went to see Zelensky. We are saved.
Oh yeah,
so there's no more open border.
Well, he went there with who's the country singer?
I don't know that. He sounded like a chicken on crack.
Paisley. I don't even know what his first name is. What's his first name? Brad Paisley was over there. He was the guy that was singing about the vaccines last time. But so Brad Paisley goes to Ukraine with Joe. What the fuck does Brad Paisley have to do with a war in Ukraine? We're not serious people anymore. Brad Paisley's doing that. He's gonna put on a concert. Wait, I thought it was a war zone. I don't understand. What the hell is going on? What's your take? What's the Cat Turd take on this one?
Hey, your guess is as good as me. What kind of information do we get out that we can even believe? I mean, do you believe Ukraine's media, Russian media, our media?
Well, by the way, listen, I don't know if I believe any of them, but I don't know that anyone, like, is it possible to be worse than our media?
It's not. I love it when CNN says, man, that Russia propaganda is terrible. You know?
Yeah. I'm saying, man, I haven't seen, the propaganda coming out of CNN would make like Mao and Stalin blush, and yet like they pretend that they're real news, and maybe that's why you've been affected. I mean, you do say like stuff that's real on there. You're not afraid to do it, and I think you're also good about promoting other people, not just sort of, so much of the internet stuff, you see people just stealing other people's stuff and trying to make it their own, and you've done a really good job of that, and maybe they return that favor. But, again, how does Cat Turd become one of the biggest voices in, like, the MAGA movement?
I have no idea. Like I said, I'd never been on social media. At that time, I was 54 years old. I didn't even know how to use social media. I remember the first time I got on it, I was like, how do you post a picture?
So you're like borderline boomer, and yet you made it in the world of social media. Like, I'm impressed, man.
I'm just an old country boy down here in the South, and somehow, I don't know, it just started, and it started getting bigger. I remember telling somebody, man, I got 1,000 followers fast, and I thought that was like, I couldn't believe it. And then it just kept going and going and going. And I have no idea. It was just lightning in a bottle. I mean, my side is a little different than most people's. That people just hammer political stuff. I do a lot of humor. I do a lot of serious stuff too. And I don't know. It just caught on, and it didn't hurt when your father started retweeting me. That's when it really, when President Trump retweeted me, that's when it really took off. The first time he retweeted me.
Yeah, well, and I even saw recently, I guess, you did like a Cat Turd poll. And like my father put it out there. And by the way,
oh man,
it's probably more accurate than like the other polling out there, which is insane. But like he put it out there, and like the left went insane that he retweeted this poll from Cat Turd.
They went crazy. But look, there was 250,000 people on it. What's more accurate, that and CNN? I mean, do they even call in? And you look at the poll, and it's like 450 people. Trump's down 80 points. I mean, it's all a lie, every bit of it.
Yeah, CNN, they called their neighbor and their lunatic leftist aunt, and Trump has no chance. Yeah. He's got zero chance of doing anything. So where'd you come up with the name Cat Turd?
It was I was on Breitbart, and I made there was Discuss. Yeah, they have, that's where they talk to each other, and Breitbart's called Discuss. And I just was like, I'm gonna get on social. I'm gonna finally just start talking. I don't know how to do it, and I just was flipping through the web, and I saw the picture of the cat, and they just said Cat Turd. I thought it was funny. I never thought I'd get 100 followers.
Yeah.
And now it's almost like it's become like a Homer Simpson. It's just beyond me. People do movies of it and this, and I sell products on my website. There's 1,000 fake Cat Turd sites on Amazon all around the world.
Yeah, I mean,
it's ridiculous.
Are you having to do a lot of defensive maneuvering protecting the Cat Turd brand at this point? Because a lot of people are, poaching that stuff. And I mean, I see the people calling themselves litter mates. It's sort of amazing.
Yeah, that's our we started a podcast, Jules and I think it's been 14 months ago. And we started with zero. We didn't have a YouTube following or a big following, and we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And so they just kind of called themselves the Litter Mates, and we got one of the strongest chats on Rumble. I mean, there's thousands.
No, like I said, I'm seeing it blow up. By the way, there seems to be, and by the way, I can get behind this. Cat Turd for press secretary. For the Trump second term. I think this could be a huge win. And, hey, listen, anyone's more competent than the current press secretary. I mean, she's a bumbling idiot, but I guess that's what you get when you have Joe Biden in here. But did you see the Maddow meltdown? Because everyone keeps talking about the Maddow meltdown, just the fact that you put out the poll and DJT retweeted it and she went crazy. But you're getting under the skin of some of the biggest lunatic leftists out there.
Oh yeah, I get doxxed 1,000 times a day. I get death threats by the thousands. I mean, it's crazy just because I just speak the truth, and the truth hurts them bad.
Yeah, it's sort of amazing because it's, I say that a lot on the show, and it's, who would have thought that like chopping the genitals off a 3-year-old like would be a fundamental part of the Democrat Party platform? And you say it, and they're like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, "But it is, And they keep doing this stuff. So telling the truth hurts. I guess it's why they go after me, but I guess it's also why perhaps I've been able to build up a decent following myself.
Yeah, you've got a few. I think you got three or four.
Yeah.
But the kids have a chance these days that go to government school? I mean, they go to government school. They take them when they're 4 years old, 5 years old. They teach them, hey, the very air you breathe is poison. Wear a mask. Hey, the earth's going to explode because of cow farts. We're all going to die in 12 years. Hey, we're going to separate you, critical race theory. And, the whites over here, the blacks, this, and this group sucks. And this group's great. And this group. And they do all this, and they do this. And hey, here's a book with showing BJs when you're 6 years old. We want you to read this.
Yeah.
And then it goes on and on and on through college. And by the time they're 22 years old and they get out of college, they're government zombies.
So you mentioned the infamous escalator line, which is sort of an amazing start, right? Who would have thought that was the start of an entire political movement, maybe the largest in American history? But in the elevator before the escalator ride, you actually said something to me. I wrote it down in my book, Triggered. I just thought it was sort of fascinating because you understood it. And you said, now's when we find out who our real friends are. Meaning you understood the way the world works. If you're going to do this, you're going to make enemies of people who were friends 15 minutes before that, but more importantly, that you chose to do it anyway, despite, sort of that consequence. What have you learned about, friendship and loyalty since then? Because I thought business was vicious until we got into politics, and now you realize that's a whole new level.
So you mentioned Rush. So Rush heard my speech, saw the whole thing, and he was with me from that moment on. I never met him, and they said, Rush Limbaugh is with you, and he ended up endorsing me very quickly. He knew all the other candidates. He ended up endorsing me, and he was absolutely an amazing friend. He never wavered. He never wavered. With all of the nonsense that went on, all the hoaxes like the Russia hoax, he never, ever wavered. The guy was amazing, and there was nobody like him. I tell you what, Sean Hannity said it, because Sean's doing great, and Sean is fantastic at what he does, but he said, there's never been anybody like Rush. Mark Levin said it too. Fantastic guy also, but he said he was one of a kind. He never wavered during the bad times, during any time. And I heard that he was on my side, didn't know him. I told you I never met him, but he was incredible. Then I got to know him. Then ultimately I gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which was a fantastic, that's the highest civilian award. I gave it to him during the State of the Union, and you had half the room going wild, and half the room was dead silent.
they were less than thrilled. I remember that one.
They were dead. They're like this, and half are just going wild, standing ovations that wouldn't stop. And you said, I wonder if there's a little divide in the nation, right? But Rush was a fantastic guy right until the end, and he was very brave. He fought on when very few people could have really sustained the pain that he was in. But he loved doing what he was doing, and he loved our country. But I'll never forget, people, they want introductions because they'd like to get the support. I never met Rush. He was the biggest guy. He had like 39 million people listening. And out of nowhere, they said, this guy loves you. He's going to endorse you. I said, I don't even know him. He just liked what I had to say. I talked about the borders. I talked about military. I talked about education. I talked about a lot of things. No speechwriter. Most of it was just off the cuff. He loved what I had to say. And from that moment on, that was a very special day, but from that moment on, Rush Limbaugh was with me 100%.
You had some interesting correspondence with Reagan going back and forth in the book, but the one that was interesting, there seemed to be a lot of back and forth with you and Richard Nixon. His wife even wrote one of the letters, basically, that Donald, if he decides to run, he's going to actually win. Talk about that relationship and how did it start?
Well, they had a very good relationship, actually. A lot of people don't know. In fact, the only time I saw Richard Nixon just totally break down was when his wife, who he loved, when she died, that was the roughest day. I've never seen him like that with all he went through. He went through hell, but with all he went through, that was tough. But she saw me on the Phil Donahue show, which you're too young to know about, but that was a very hot show. That was pre-Oprah, sort of an Oprah type show. And I was interviewed, and she said, oh, if he ran for office, he'd win. And he told me that she said that if I ever ran for president, I would win, and all of this. But it was nice, and he put it in writing, and it's one of the letters that we put in.
So last week, I had the privilege of going with you to UFC Miami. I thought that was incredible. And, that was, deep blue Miami, and the ovation in the crowd. Even Dana said he's never seen anything like it. Talk about Dana White, the early times at the UFC. I mean, there's letters from Vince McMahon. I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of that mergering UFC, WWE as well. But that was sort of a de facto cooling. That group of people, and just a roar when you came in with Kid Rock. It just went viral from there. Talk about that.
So first of all, those two people are incredible. Vince McMahon, what a job he's done.
There's a great letter in here from him.
Yeah, he's an incredible man, and his wife Linda, she is fantastic, and she really helped a lot. Believe me, a lot of people, they talk Vince, and Vince would be the first to say that Linda was very instrumental too. And Dana is just nobody like him. The job he's done with the UFC. They sold it for $4 billion. And it looks like the people that paid $4 billion made a good deal, because Dana, I don't even know if he's replaceable. I always say everybody's replaceable. I'm not sure he's replaceable or what he does. He's an incredible person. And they're both very loyal people. Those people, all three of them, I have to say that, because I'm going to include Linda, but she was head of small business. And small business is actually very large business, but the Small Business Administration, and she did a phenomenal job doing that. You hear small business, sounds like small, and then you look at, tens of billions and just money like you never saw anything going out. She was great. But Dana White, the job he's done with UFC is just incredible. We walked into the arena, he said, I have never, ever had a scene like that. And there wasn't one hater. There wasn't one person in the whole arena. I don't know what they have, whatever it holds, and probably then you add some, because the basketball court is much bigger than a ring. So what happens is they have, the people are loaded on the court. The place was packed, and he said, I've never had anything like that where there was such enthusiasm and love, and the fighter even, he's a great guy, Jorge Masvidal,
great guy.
Great fighter. He was out and he said, Trump, the greatest president we've ever had. And it was just
a bunch of the other fighters, by the way, for those who may not have even seen them up to TV, jumped across the fence and were like just giving you total respect. And, from every demographic, guys you wouldn't think, but
very nice.
They got it. It was sort of unique to see. I think that fighter, that individual sport, they self-reliant, so many of the things that as conservatives, we actually believe. It was fascinating. And
it is true, though. I mean, they're in the ring. They can't blame it on somebody else. They are there by themselves against rough customers, and you gotta fend. You can't. There's no bullshit involved. There's no nothing. You gotta fight, and there is something very nice about it. It's old-fashioned. It's somewhat primitive, but it's amazing. And there's no excuses. You can't blame it on somebody else.
Well, so speaking of primitive, because it feels like it that way these days. You have a great line in some of the speeches I've heard lately talking about you'd be the greatest women's basketball coach of all time if you could just recruit LeBron James, who doesn't exactly share our political beliefs, but still a good basketball player. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's amazing and true, and it shows how ridiculous what's going on in women's sports, or supposedly women's sports.
He's a great basketball player, but he's not a person that I like. But he's a great basketball player, and as are some others, but he's really a fantastic player. But I don't, happen to agree with him. But I said, women, it's so unfair to women what they're doing. They're putting men into women's sports, and they try and justify it. That's one of the many things, like open borders, like voter ID, like all of these things. There's so many things. It's common sense.
The mutilation of minors.
The mutilation. There's 100 different things you could say. I actually call it now April Fools, because almost everything, like you said, who would say open borders are good, or people are pouring into your country and that's a good thing? I say, no, it's April Fool's Day. Who would say that men should play in women's sports? No, it's April Fool's Day. You could do this with 100 different things. Education with the principles where they get these principles and they're horrible. And every single thing, almost every one of their energy independence. We have more liquid gold under our feet than any other country. People don't, we have more than Saudi Arabia, we have more than Russia. We were energy independent. We were soon going to be energy dominant. Within a year, we were going to make a fortune. We were going to pay off debt. We were going to lower taxes. We were going to do things that were incredible. And they stopped it. And they stopped it when it hit the all-time high. Energy, the oil and gas hit an all-time high. And they announced there will be no drilling. And yet now we take it from Venezuela, which has tar, which has very bad stuff. And it's refined in Houston because that's the only plants, those are the only plants that can refine Venezuela oil, which is lousy, which is
so
thick,
much sulfur,
terrible, very bad. If you're a big believer in what they say going into the atmosphere, it's the worst. And we refine it in Houston, and we take their oil. So here's the thing. We have no common sense in our country. We have no leadership in our country. We're not respected anywhere in the world. They're laughing at us. They think we're fools. And our country has lost its way. We're a country in decline. I say it in speeches now. It hurts me to say it. We're a failing nation. We're a country in decline, serious decline. I think I have to say serious decline. And it was all self-imposed. If they just left the energy policy the way it was, we wouldn't have had any inflation. We wouldn't have had any inflation. We had the greatest economy in history, and we're going to do it again. We had, without question, we had the greatest energy, we had the lowest prices we've ever had, and they were coming down even further. We had the greatest, it was the greatest moment prior to COVID coming in, and then we fixed it, and the stock market ended up at the end being higher than it was just pre-COVID. And we had the greatest economy in the history of our country. There was never a nation in the history of the world that did as well as we were doing just prior to COVID coming in. I'll never forget, I had some people, some political people, very big ones, very good ones, and some pollsters in just prior to COVID coming in. And we were talking about the election because it was coming down the road pretty soon. And they said, if Abraham Lincoln and George Washington got together and came back from the dead, and they ran as president and vice president, they could not beat you. And that's where our country was. And the other thing, and just to finish up, people were coming together. I was getting calls from people that you would not suspect, and this country was coming together. African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, people with great degrees from the best colleges, people with no degrees, people with no high school degree, people with only a high school degree. Everybody was working. We had 161 million people working. We've never hit a number like that before, or even close, including now. It's a shame what's happened to our country. Our country is now in trouble. Look at these big cities. They're rotting away. Nobody wants to live in our cities. When I was young, the biggest thing I could do is get to Manhattan. I want to get to Manhattan. I'm going to make so much. I'm going to build so
we got to
many
get the hell out of
beautiful
Manhattan.
buildings. So many beautiful buildings. I'm going to build so beautiful, such beautiful buildings. And I did that. That was a great thing. Yeah. Today, people don't want to be in the cities.
Well, it's scary. I know women that are afraid to walk down the streets.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I think everyone understands that. I think everyone's excited to get involved in 2024. I think now more than ever, they understand the stakes. They understand the lies. And perhaps it took the disaster we're going through to actually wake up people who are agnostic to politics, people who, were just busy trying to live their American dream. But now they've watched that be exported to China and elsewhere at their expense. And I think they're ready to actually fight back for their country. So we're looking forward to 2024.
I hope they are, and I hope they're going to fight. And if they don't fight, we're not going to have a country anymore, because this country is in deep, deep trouble, including the possibility of World War III, which would be a nuclear war, which would be unlike anything that anybody or any nation has ever experienced. And we're much closer than we are further. I hope it doesn't happen. But we have people that don't know what they're doing. And we have China and we have Russia, and they're teaming up, and now they have Iran and they have North Korea, and they're all teaming up against us, and we have nobody. We're losing countries and they're gaining countries. And if we lose our dollar standard, which is a real possibility now,
every day,
that will be like losing a war. That would be in many ways bigger than losing a war. So I hope people are going to get out and they're going to vote in the primaries and they're going to vote in the election. And if we don't change government, we're not going to have a country anymore. And that's a certainty.
Okay, guys. Thanks so much. That was awesome. Remember, you can find the show on Apple Podcasts. You can download it on Spotify. So if you get your podcast that way, if you're traveling, if you're in your car, if you listen along, whatever it may be, when you're working out, you can get it that way, not just here on Rumble. We'll put it up afterwards. Also, guys, make sure you're liking. Just hit the like button. I see how many people are actually watching in real time, and I see the likes. And I'm sure there's some trolls, as you see them in the comments, but the rest of you, hit that button. That's how we beat the algorithm. That's how we beat the censorship elsewhere. That's how we get the message out there. Send it to your friends. Encourage them to subscribe. And also, guys, make sure to check out our incredible sponsors. Check out Goldco. Learn how to hedge. Let them take you through, but hedge against the insanity, the Biden-caused disasters, the financial turmoil we see each and every day. You can do that by going to donjuniorgold.com, donjrgold.com. Learn more. Also, guys, check out the folks at My Patriot Supply. Take care of your family's food needs. Okay, when the world goes to crap and it feels like it could at any second, you have 25 years. You keep it on supply. They're the leader in emergency preparedness. And the best-selling 3-month emergency food kit gives you everything you need. Again, it lasts 25 years. So in that time, someone's going to do something really stupid and you're going to need it. So go to prepare, like PREPARE, with Don Jr., DONJR.com. That's PREPARE with DonJr.com. And last but not least, guys, go check out The Wellness Company, right? We got the food side covered just now. You saw with COVID and craziness and from tick bites to serious health outbreaks, you can get a kit from The Wellness Company that gives you all the life-saving medications you need to stockpile, along with a guidebook for safe and easy use. Again, avoid the disastrous wait lines when something really bad happens. We saw what goes on with that. You see what's happening all over the world. We want you to empower yourself. We want you to take control. That's a big tenet of this show. So go to twc.health/triggered for 15% discount off the medical emergency kit. That's twc.health, like The Wellness Company, twc.health/triggered for a 15% discount on the emergency kit, twc.health/triggered. With that, guys, check out the sponsors, support them. It takes some guts to support a show like this. We really appreciate you guys. Like, share, subscribe, and we will see you on Thursday. Happy New Year, everyone.